Upon my entry, I found Derek Stroud, my wife's new acquaintance, seated at the table, bathed in candlelight with two glasses, a smirk that suggested he anticipated my departure. He insolently instructed, "Step aside, old-timer. I'm Franklin, age 63. I no longer raise my voice or throw punches." That night, I understood that tranquility does not equate to capitulation. How would you respond if your spouse brought you to dinner, only for another man to demand your exit from your own life? Have you ever been underestimated due to choosing decorum over theatrics? Franklin wasn't anticipating a candlelit supper. He expected a dialogue. Instead, he encountered an unspoken rebuttal. The Hollow Creek Diner remained largely untouched in the 2 decades since Franklin first took Marla there. The booths still bore their slightly frayed red vinyl cushions. The same weathered menu board above the counter continued to guarantee an endless supply of coffee and homemade pie. The aroma, a mix of cinnamon, coffee, and old fryer oil, enveloped Franklin like an unwanted reminder of its potency. Previously, on last Thanksgiving morning, Franklin had spent hours slowly roasting a turkey. He'd prepared homemade stuffing, mashed potatoes with garlic and cream as Marla liked, and arranged the fancy dishes too. Marla merely smiled, thanked him absent-mindedly, and focused more on her phone than the meal itself. This year, no turkey, no plans. Just a terse message: "Meet me at the diner. We need to talk." Franklin had imagined maybe counseling, perhaps a plea, or even a goodbye. But he didn't foresee Derek Stroud. Already seated was Derek, sprawled in the corner of the booth with elbows out and slouching posture, wearing a tight black sweater that seemed too small for him. Derek was all athleticism and grin, his self-assurance so boisterous it almost eclipsed Nat King Cole's serenade from the jukebox. And there was Marla seated beside him. Not opposite him, not in an impartial stance, but next to him. Her hand lay on the table distressingly near Derek's. She looked up as Franklin approached and smiled as if they were long-time acquaintances. He hesitated for a moment, uncertain whether to turn away or move closer. Nora, the waitress, caught his gaze from the counter and offered a gentle, empathetic smile. She was already pouring the cider without asking if he wanted it. Marla indicated the vacant chair beside them. "Franklin, thank you for coming. Don't you remember Derek?" He recognized the name. Everyone in Hollow Creek did. Derek had been the town's high school quarterback 35 years ago, and he still carried himself as if his glory never faded. Now he ran a fitness center just beyond town and dispensed nutrition advice like scripture. Franklin settled into the seat cautiously, his jaw clenching. His fingers slightly gripped the table edge, the only evidence of tension on an otherwise calm face. Derek moved closer, tone even but devoid of warmth. "Let's avoid unnecessary complexity, mate. We're not adolescents. You deserve truth." Franklin remained silent, casting a glance towards Marla, who maintained eye contact. Derek persisted. "For some time now, we've been involved. I didn't intend for it to occur, but it did, and now it's become apparent." Still, Franklin said nothing. The diner's festive wreaths cast a reflection in the window behind Derek, shimmering green and gold in the soft glow of the lights. "You may feel anger," Derek offered, "but consider this. You can leave with your honor intact, or you can make a spectacle." Marla reached for her cider, her hand steady. Derek's voice stiffened slightly. "You don't wish for things to become messy." Franklin finally gazed at him, not looking down or away, but directly into his eyes. "Your silence does not equate to capitulation," he said calmly. The ensuing quiet was thicker than any impact. Even Derek seemed to pause, shifting his stance. Nora arrived then, setting a piece of apple pie before Franklin with a subtle nod. He hadn't requested it. She was aware he wouldn't consume it. Yet, certain customs held significance, even for the sake of decorum. Franklin rose, extracted a 20 from his coat pocket, placed it on the table, and covered it with a neatly folded napkin containing a brief note of gratitude for Nora. He avoided looking at Marla. He didn't touch the dessert. As he exited, winter air greeted him forcefully. Snow blanketed the pavement, soft and pristine. His breath condensed ahead of him. For an extended moment, he remained stationary under the diner's yellow lamps. His figure in the window was faint, superimposed with Marla and Derek still inside, still toasty, clueless that a transformation had just occurred within him. This wasn't anger. Anger flared up fiercely. This was something chillier, more concentrated. The quietude of winter rivers mirrored this slow, dense, methodical. He refrained from looking back. Within, under lights dusted with snow, Franklin murmurs softly, "It isn't finished, yet it won't resemble what you imagine. Homes can die silently or merely pretend life for a while to deceive." This house greeted him not with uproar or shouts, but a silence that seemed rehearsed, as if waiting. The lights were dimly lit yet functioning, the heater purring in its usual winter corner, and the faint scent of roasted carrots and something chicken-like still lingered. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it was like entering a stage set created by someone else. Upon closing the door, Franklin remained standing, his coat still on, his gaze sweeping over the area. Two wine glasses sat on the counter, one bearing lipstick marks. Neither were his. The dinner plate resided in the sink, rinsed but not washed, and next to it, a neatly folded ironed napkin. Marla hadn't ironed a napkin for years. The fire burned feebly within the gas heater, projecting elongated shadows onto the wall. Franklin treaded silently through the house, refraining from switching on any additional lights. He wasn't afraid. Rather, he sought to preserve a fabrication it was attempting to convey. Upstairs, the bed was impeccably arranged, resembling a hotel room, with corners neatly tucked and pillows perfectly aligned. This level of precision hinted not at regularity, but anticipation. He leaned in closely, taking a whiff. Her scent still faintly lingered on the pillowcase, yet beneath it, there was something else, sharper, more chemical, a man's cologne, one Franklin neither possessed nor intended to acquire. Seated on the bed's edge, he remained motionless. His hands rested heavily on his thighs, the chill from outside gradually seeping through his sleeves. Marla seemed to hold her breath in unison with him. In the stillness, his mind didn't race. Instead, it organized, observed, categorized, accepted. He rose once more and walked towards her vanity. The tidiness was almost obsessive, no loose bobby pins, no partially opened creams. Every brush in order, he opened her seldom-used small drawer and discovered just a crumpled receipt. A hotel stay for 2 nights. Derek's initials endorsed on the reservation line. He gazed at it without flinching. The paper didn't ignite in his grasp or demand obliteration. Instead, it simply validated what the diner had failed to complete saying. He descended to the lower level. The coffee pot was still warm but undisturbed. Without uttering a word, he turned it off. Near the dining nook, their wedding photo remained. Marla boasted soft curls back then, while Franklin's hair had more salt than silver. He fixed his gaze on the picture. No tears fell. Instead, there was a somber pressure in his chest, as though his body was struggling to discern its feelings and had opted for silence as an alternative. In the pantry, hidden behind a forgotten jar of molasses and a damaged ice cream scoop, he located the ancient radio, gathering dust and neglected. In their first married Christmas, the gift he'd given her was enveloped excessively in gold paper with a keepsake ribbon she kept for decades. He picked it up, examined it, then placed it back on the shelf. Not everything warranted recovery. In the den, he opened the lower drawer beneath the couch and extracted a modest duffel bag. It wasn't extravagant, merely his belongings. 2 pairs of pants, flannel shirts, the blue sweater she always said accentuated his eyes, socks, toothbrush, razor, all arranged methodically. No haste, just clarity. Before departing, he halted in the kitchen, extracted a notepad from the drawer near the refrigerator, and scribbled firmly, "You chose noise. I choose quiet." He left the note where she'd see it, beside the stove, beneath their Vermont-sourced ceramic salt pig shaped like a chicken. For some reason, he refrained from moving it. It still elicited a laugh from her once. Outside, snow resumed, delicate flakes dancing under street lamps. At the porch's last step, a soft groan emanated from the neighboring house. Mr. Cal Turner remained on his porch, cloaked in a heavy robe, clutching a hot beverage. He gave a single, slow nod, as if anticipating the event. Franklin reciprocated with a similar nod. Silence was all that was needed. The truth could travel stealthily in places like Hollow Creek. He exited the porch and navigated around the side of his house, avoiding the front driveway for the gate leading to the rear alley. His boots left clear footprints in the untouched snow, each step calculated. The duffel bag swung gently at his side, the zipper occasionally jingling like a distant bell. As he passed the workshop, he paused. The light inside was still on. His father's toolbox remained exactly where it had been for years, hidden beneath an aging pegboard that hadn't held fresh tools in over a decade. He hesitated before the door, contemplating a touch of the wood to ground himself. Instead of lingering, he cast a gentle glance and carried on walking. His phone vibrated as he reached the gate. He drew it from his coat pocket to find a solitary message illuminating the screen. "Done with your theatrics yet?" He studied this for some time, his thumb poised above the keys. Yet he chose not to respond. A reply was unnecessary. People assumed Franklin was taciturn because he was feeble. In fact, he was silent because he listened. The workshop bore the scent of aged rubber, winter salt, and gasoline, a familiar aroma it had carried since Hollow Creek first required an auto shop. Snowflakes danced outside the frost-covered windows, creating soft halos around the tools on the pegboard. The back office was cozy and cluttered, and the coffee pot bubbled in the corner as if it belonged nowhere else. Franklin faced Eddie Malone, who still wore the same flannel he had during his days as a cop. Eddie was the type who only asked questions when he already knew the answers. Today, he merely took a sip from his worn-out mug that once belonged to Red, showing no signs of fatigue while he waited. "I'm not here for confrontation," Franklin stated firmly. "I'm seeking truth." Eddie inclined his head, placing his mug aside. "That why you're being so calm?" Franklin offered a faint grin in response. "Have I ever been one to raise my voice?" Eddie chuckled. "It's unusual for someone to enter this place with that expression unless they're about to create an explosion." "I'm not," Franklin assured him. "At least not verbally." Eddie reclined in his chair, interlocking his fingers on his abdomen. "Explain the extent of this matter." Franklin didn't go into specifics. Instead, he described its outline. The diner, the necklace, the wine glasses, the hotel receipt, Derek Stroud, Carla's growing silence that surpassed any dispute they had ever experienced. Eddie listened attentively, as if sorting documents in his mind. Upon Franklin's conclusion, Eddie stood, approached the filing cabinet in the corner, and retrieved a folder labeled Public Records and Leases. Without any ceremony, he placed it on the desk. "Derek's been careless," Eddie remarked. "Signed a lease for a downtown apartment last month, not his main residence. Bookings, too, one of M's under Marla's old initials, MHG. I verified the dates. They coincide with the weekends she claimed to be at school fundraisers." Franklin scrutinized the papers but didn't touch them. "You've kept all this?" "I save a lot of things," Eddie replied. "Sometimes justice isn't uniformed." The door chimed abruptly, causing them to look up. In walked Sadie Garner, shaking off snow from her coat. She seemed surprised to see Franklin, then slightly relieved. "Didn't think I'd find you two together," she said softly. Franklin stood up. "Afternoon, Sadie." She nodded, eyes softening. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just needed to deliver something." From her purse, she extracted an envelope, its edges slightly worn. Marla had written this long ago, but never posted it. "Last spring, when she requested my aid in clearing out her study drawer, I discovered it then." Franklin hesitated before questioning her. "Why hand it over to me now?" Sadie fixed him with a steady gaze. "I believe you are due the entire story, and I trust you'll know how to handle it." He accepted the envelope, keeping it casually in his grasp. "I didn't open it yet, thank you." She nodded once more before departing silently as she had entered. Eddie eased open a drawer and produced a compact USB. He held it delicately, as if it were heavier than its weight suggested. "This contains all I could uncover: hotel logs, financial transactions, Derek's gym business registration, investors using their maiden names." Franklin remained unfazed, simply taking the USB and slipping it into his pocket like a loose coin. "Are you planning to destroy everything?" Eddie inquired, whispering. Franklin's eyes were untroubled. No, I merely intend to illuminate a single candle and let truth take its course. He conversed quietly with Eddie for a few more minutes on mundane topics, weather, snow tires. The streak of losses by the high school team, leaving behind the untouched envelope in his coat pocket and the USB pressing against his side, he stepped out into the falling snowflakes. Upon returning to the house, jointly owned with Marla, though she was no longer there, he refrained from turning on the ceiling light. He placed his keys down, hung up his coat, and stood by the window as snow accumulated on the banister. On the porch, he noticed a package wrapped in foil and a cloth napkin. Entering the house, he found a warm loaf of cornbread sitting silently, the note beneath it written neatly. Thought you might need something genuine tonight. Cowl. Franklin didn't show any signs of happiness. However, his shoulders seemed to relax slightly. He stepped inside, put the loaf on the kitchen counter, then walked to the nightstand. He positioned the USB next to the pile of unread books that had gathered dust for weeks. He chose not to connect the USB, nor did he open the envelope. Instead, he moved towards the pantry, retrieved an old radio from behind the molasses container, and cleaned it off with his sleeve before switching it on. At first, it crackled like an old memory, but soon soft jazz filled the space, drifting softly and smoothly, notes lingering as if friendly spirits were present. Franklin settled in the armchair, closed his eyes, and merely listened. In small towns, secrets don't need to be broadcasted. They simply circulate between cups of coffee and raised eyebrows. The snowfall had been sufficient to soften the sounds of Hollow Creek. Tires made no noise on the streets lined with slush, and conversations flowed silently between porches and shop windows. Franklin walked with his coat fastened to the top and hands tucked into his pockets, in no rush to go anywhere. He didn't have to. The post office was perched on the intersection of Maple and Fifth, a compact brick building adorned with garland and twinkling lights. In the interior, the heater clattered, echoing noises reminiscent of its operation since the Nixon era. A few neighbors congregated near the counter, engrossed in conversations among themselves rather than with the postal clerk. Franklin politely acknowledged them as he moved toward the bulletin board, feigning interest while listening. Apparently, she's already referring to him as her partner, one woman murmured, her tone tinged with more curiosity than criticism. Still not divorced. Oh dear, the other responded. They've been holding hands since Halloween. I noticed it at Murphy's grocery. Franklin continued to gaze at a faded flyer for the Hollow Creek High School Alumni Winter Gathering, set for December 17th, Community Hall. At one point, there was a time when he would have felt joy at this thought. Now, it merely evoked feelings of being 14 again. It mirrored his emotions. Upon stepping back into the frosty light, he momentarily caught sight of a familiar truck parked diagonally across the street. Derek. Standing by the wall, donning sunglasses and casually crossing his arms, Franklin continued walking. He approached Whitman's Books and Things, guided by a hand-painted sign. Upon entering, the bell above the door tinkled softly, ushering in warmth infused with cinnamon, paper, and an old heater's quiet hum. Shelves encircled the store as if a library had lost its borders, and behind the counter stood Joanne Whitman. Her eyes sparkled as she recognized Franklin Hale. "Are you still doodling trees on napkins?" she asked, unsurprised. He offered a slight grin in response, implying that indeed he was. Joanne chuckled, retrieving a kettle from behind the counter. "Do you still prefer cider the same way? There are few things worth altering," she added. She filled a cup for him and handed it over, her warm hands revealing lined fingers. "I understand about what you've heard," she said softly, to which he simply responded, "Yes." They sat at the back, surrounded by books seldom touched for weeks. She refrained from probing. Instead, she sipped her cider, examining him with a gaze that only a librarian could possess, as if weighing an invisible burden he carried. "You know," she eventually said, "Derek was like a storm in a football uniform, constantly seeking a wall to collide with." Franklin observed the vapor from his cup. "And I was the wall." She gave a melancholic smile. "But you never broke through. Instead, you endured the impact and moved on." He pondered this thought. on small lockers and hallway taunts, on how he'd never retaliated but retained all memories. It didn't feel like strength then, he admitted. Joanne tilted her head slightly. You weren't weak back then. You were simply overwhelmed by a noise too deafening to hear your own power. The sound of Derek's keys pierced the silence outside. They watched as he got into his vehicle and drove off, never glancing in their direction. Joanne remained quiet, just as Franklin did. Something passed between them amidst the quiet. Franklin eventually rose, expressed gratitude, and took the second cider she'd surreptitiously prepared. For Mr. Turner, she mentioned. He acknowledged with a nod. He prefers it warm, she smiled. He enjoys most things tranquil. As Franklin exited, the cold caressed his cheeks like an affectionate sigh. He ambled along the snow-blanketed path toward Mr. Turner's porch, where each step echoed in the silence. The boards groaned under his weight, and the wind stirred the wreath on the door gently. Yet, the rocking chair was vacant. The light within was off. For a brief moment, Franklin stood there, cup of cider in hand, gazing at the spot where the elderly man often sat wrapped in blankets and silent acknowledgments. Then, gradually, he placed the cup beside the door and retreated into the quietude. Some battles are won through force, others through documents, and the valor to unveil them in silent resolve. The silence in the room was heavy, carrying an air of solemnity unique to law offices, where unspoken truths linger. Two chairs faced a wooden desk, with a solitary window offering a view of Main Street, where the wind played with the remaining dry leaves against the pavement. No snow had fallen yet, but it was imminent, bringing a stillness that precedes a storm breaking its silence. Franklin sat upright, his coat fastened, his fingers gently resting on the table's edge. Opposite him, Marla wore a navy blazer and lipstick too dark for daylight. Her hands were folded, her wedding ring missing. She appeared polished, professional, composed. Charles King, the mediator, cleared his throat. Today we gather to discuss final terms. I expect decorum, politeness, and most importantly, clarity. Marla gave a crisp nod in response. Franklin remained silent, instead placing a manila envelope on the table without a sound. The weight of its contents filled the room. Marla glanced at it and then back up to him. What's this? She cautiously opened it, taking out various papers one by one. Printed screenshots, bank transfer records, hotel receipts with timestamps, lease agreements bearing Derek Stroud's name beside hers. Charles furrowed his brows. Some of these accounts were joint, others hidden under your maiden name. This might be considered misrepresentation, Mrs. Hale. Marla clenched her jaw, but maintained a composed tone. Are you spying on me? Franklin didn't react. No, just recording what was already discarded. She looked out the window and then back. You've always been overly dramatic when hurt. I've always been quiet when let down, he said. You never stay long enough to distinguish between the two. Charles tapped his pen against the lease page. These documents don't prove our financial dependence, which may lead to a denial of spousal support by Mr. Hale. Marla folded her arms. Franklin stated, I'm providing you with the most straightforward way out. Charles examined them both, querying, Franklin, could you clarify your conditions for the record? Unfalteringly gazing ahead, Franklin responded, no alimony, no shared assets beyond what she's already taken. She keeps her name. I retain my tranquility. Marla's voice trembled. You consider yourself noble, but you're merely inflicting punishment without raising your voice. He faced her, composed and resolute. You invited me for dinner. What you served was a funeral disguised as closure. You seem less formidable now, as if your heels can no longer elevate you. Inquiringly, Franklin posed, Why are you doing this? His answer was swift. Because I recall who I was before I transformed into who you required me to be. Charles set down his pen and relaxed in his seat. You're more composed than most. That typically means you've already relinquished control. Franklin donned his coat, nodding in agreement. Marla made no further remark. Her words weren't necessary. The room's quietude had taken positions. As Franklin exited, the air felt like a priest without sharpness. It chilled him down his neck, but he didn't adjust his collar. His phone vibrated. A missive from Eddie. He's invoking your name at the gym, Frank. You ought to witness this. He didn't accept anything from her. Instead, he ceased surrendering fragments of himself. The temporary cabin nestled by Hollow Creek, its veranda overlooking a hushed grove where trees concealed snow like mysteries. A gentle twilight started, veiling everything in that blue hush preceding night's arrival. Smoke softly rose from the chimney, and within, the fireplace steadily pulsed, casting a glow on pine-paneled walls and a kitchen with a faint aroma of ginger and warm bread. Franklin remained by the window, a mug in his hand, observing snowflakes dance sideways in the wind. An hour prior, he had kindled the fire following a reread of Sadie's letter. One sentence resonated within him like a constant beat. I never found the courage to confide, yet I witnessed you. I always did. The tension arrived subtly, politely, devoid of pressure. A knock ensued, revealing Joanne Whitman swathed in a bulky scarf, her cheeks rosy, clutching a paper sack. She declared, I've brought 2 items, one for eating, the other for listening. He made way, granting her entrance with a nod. She moved fluidly, as if she was accustomed to this, fitting seamlessly into tranquil surroundings. Upon setting the bag on the table, she extracted a freshly baked loaf and a compactly wrapped item enshrouded in cloth. Unveiling it, Franklin's breath momentarily halted. It was his old radio restored, refurbished, its clouded dial now transparent. Plugging it in, she gently adjusted the knob. A brief silence ensued before soft static filled the air. Then, jazz, mellow and comforting, like a whisper close to one's ear saying, You're still present. Joanne remained silent. She placed an envelope next to the loaf of bread. It's from Cal, she stated. He asked the nurse to deliver it when the snow fell. Franklin gently picked it up, settling in the old wooden chair by the fire. The envelope bore handwriting, the ink slightly smudged. Inside was a brief note written in Cal Turner's distinctive neat script. Frank, don't miss out on the good ones twice. Cornbread was merely an excuse. Perhaps you should listen to something other than your thoughts now. Cal, Franklin folded the note, flattening it with his fingers without uttering a word. The silence remained unbroken. Joanne filled 2 mugs with cider, handing one to him without inquiry about his preference. They sat at the table, the radio humming softly between them, the bread neither too cool nor warm. Neither reached for the bread. Instead, Joanne looked towards the shelf above the fireplace, where a slim volume of poetry stood nestled between a field guide and an unused recipe book. You know, she said, Dickinson was correct. The best things are often those we don't hear or see. Things that can fly are designed for landing only once. This was the line she softly read from the open book. Hope, with feathers, resides in the heart, unspoken and incessant. Franklin shut his eyes, escaping reminiscences of the past, the house he departed, and the woman who shared its walls. He merely listened. The fire crackled faintly while the snowfall intensified, adhering to railings and gravel paths outside. Inside, there was an aroma of pine and bread baked by hand, a delight typical of bookstore owners. Joanne's hand lingered close to the table, not intruding but present. For the first time in a long while, Franklin whispered, I don't have to justify myself. Joanne offered a genuine smile, neither wide nor radiant, before closing the book and placing it next to the radio. Some narratives persist instead of concluding, she stated. They merely pause. The radio softly plays. Externally, snow adheres. Internally, for once, there's no absence. Certain endings don't announce with slamming doors or raised voices. Instead, they materialize with tranquil melodies, a tidy kitchen, and the subtle pressure of someone deciding to remain. Franklin didn't triumph or fail, he merely exited the tumult and reclaimed what had subtly been his all-along dignity, calmness, and the liberty to no longer justify his worth. For betrayal doesn't define you, but how you conduct yourself after it does. Like a porch light burning through winter twilight, stillness can transform into a form of fortitude and compassion, the most eloquent response. If this tale evoked something within you, perhaps share that calmness with someone nearby. They might be waiting for their chance to quietly start anew.